The 9,992nd meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in the Middle East. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with
relations between Israel and Hamas alongside the U.S. and Egypt. We reiterate that the use of force must be at all times aligned with international law. Equally, The sovereignty and territorial integrity of all states must be upheld as a matter of principle. Greece has condemned on multiple occasions and in the strongest possible terms the October 7 terrorist attacks perpetrated by Hamas. We continue to call for the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages inhumanely held ever since. We firmly believe that Hamas, as a terrorist organization, cannot and should not have any political role in the future governance of Gaza. Similarly, we unequivocally condemned the recent terrorist attack in East Jerusalem. Both are abhorrent incidents which highlight the urgency of reaching a political solution, one that will bring stability and prosperity, breaking the cycle of violence. In this context, disrupting ongoing diplomatic efforts is
the hostages suffer in appalling conditions, and the people of Gaza endure starvation and repeated displacement. This week's evacuation orders across northern Gaza will worsen the humanitarian catastrophe. The Israeli government's decision to further escalate its offensive in Gaza is wrong. And today, I reiterate that we urge Israel to reconsider immediately. We staunchly support the efforts of Qatar, the United States, and Egypt to achieve a ceasefire in Gaza, to secure the release of the hostages and bring this conflict
yet again. So let me state the obvious. We need a ceasefire. Hostages must be released. Hindrance of aid deliveries must end. The negotiations have certainly seen its share.
Palestine conflict to rage on for almost 8 decades. On the contrary, the use of force has simply seen the entrenchment of the logic of extremes. It has fueled a cycle of violence which hinders and indeed blocks any path towards a political solution. The result of these acts has been more uncertainty, greater risk to the entire civilian population, including to the hostages that remain in Gaza, and the weakening of the mediation process spearheaded by Qatar, Egypt, and the United States. Attacking a state who is acting as a mediator and who has acted as headquarters for negotiations seeking peace, as is the case with Qatar, is a direct strike on the possibility of achieving a ceasefire in Gaza, a ceasefire which is vital to halt the suffering of the Palestinian civilian population and to open a safe environment to allow the immediate, dignified and unconditional release of all hostages who are now not safer, but on the contrary, facing even greater risk. These irresponsible actions are not simply a threat to the security of the civilian population. They may also have, and indeed did, imperil accredited diplomatic missions in Doha, including the Embassy of Panama, only a short distance away from the attack, some 100 meters. We wish to express our sincere condolences with the families of the Qatari victims and other victims of this attack. There may have been victims from other friendly countries, and that undermines international friendly efforts to guarantee that we have a stable, safe environment crucial for dialogue and negotiation. Mr. President, what occurred in Doha is part of a spiral of violence, which is also reflected in the attacks waged against a humanitarian flotilla in Tunisia and more generally in the devastating situation in Gaza and the West Bank. Panama prioritizes negotiation and dialogue as the only legitimate pathways towards a lasting peace. With that in mind, we invite parties to demonstrate indeed that they are seeking a genuine peace agreement and not seeking to extend the conflict. Moreover, we here underline the fact that no goal, as legitimate as it may be considered to be, can justify the use of means which violate international law or the principle of protecting human life. Panama asks the parties to exercise the utmost restraint. We urge them to step up their efforts to urgently achieve a sustainable ceasefire to facilitate the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages and to guarantee the safe, appropriate and sustained access of humanitarian aid, vital humanitarian aid to Gaza at scale. The experience of the temporary truce, however short and fragile it was, demonstrated that it is possible to halt human suffering.
And outside areas of hostilities. We must be clear. International law does not recognize revenge. International law recognizes only lawful self-defense on the use of force against imminent unlawful attack or collective action authorized by the Security Council. Acts motivated by revenge, retaliation are illegal. No justification can excuse deliberate attacks on those who are not engaged in active combat functions. Colleagues, these developments point to a larger challenge confronting the international community: the persistence of impunity in the face of serious violation of the UN Charter and international law. When such acts are met with silence or selective responses, perpetrators are emboldened to continue, eroding the credibility and weakening the rules-based international legal order. For the Council, failure to respond risks reducing this body to a bystander in the very crises it is mandated to address, and would amount to a referendum on the system we've built. Sierra Leone therefore urges this Council to affirm unequivocally the inviolability of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Qatar and all member states to ensure that unlawful assassinations of protected persons are thoroughly investigated, to hold perpetrators accountable under international law, and to redouble efforts to bring the current conflict to an end through genuine good faith negotiations leading to a just and lasting peace. Mr. President, as we speak to the violations of the sovereignty of the State of Qatar, in the State of Palestine, in both the West Bank and Gaza, the inhumanity continues with ongoing hostilities. We remain gravely concerned about the humanitarian catastrophe in the Gaza Strip, with the declared famine, bombardment, and evacuation orders in Gaza City, mass displacement, act and rhetoric evincing genocidal intent. We are equally gravely concerned about the plight of hostages and recall with condemnation the 8 September attack on Israeli civilians at a Jerusalem bus stop, in which 6 people were killed and 8 others wounded. Violence on either side will only breed more violence, deepen suffering, and erode prospect for peace. We reiterate the imperative for an immediate ceasefire, the safe and unimpeded delivery of humanitarian aid, and the release of all hostages. The Council must demand a ceasefire, particularly when a mediator state has been so flagrantly attacked. The peoples of the Middle East, and indeed the peoples of the world, look to this Council for leadership, consistency, and resolve. Upholding the Charter is not optional. It is a binding obligation. Sovereignty must be respected, civilians and other protected persons must be safeguarded, and international law must be enforced without fear or favor. Only by doing so can we end impunity, restore confidence in the rules-based international legal order, and open the path to peace. As the Irish poet William Butler Yeats won in The Second Coming, immortalized in Things Fall Apart by the Nigerian author Chinua Achebe, and I quote, "Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loose upon the wall," end of quote. The United Nations is the center of the post-1945 multilateral rules-based system, and the Security Council its nucleus for peace and security. We must therefore act now with unity and determination. Anything less will betray our collective responsibility and the trust that the peoples of the world have placed in us. The system, as we know it, risks falling apart, and anarchy would indeed be loose upon the world. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Guyana.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for convening this briefing with the requisite urgency. I welcome the participation of His Excellency the Prime Minister of Qatar and His Excellency the Deputy Prime Minister of Jordan in today's meeting. I also thank the delegations of Algeria, Pakistan, and Somalia for requesting the meeting and express appreciation to Under-Secretary General Rosemary DiCarlo for the important information provided regarding Israel's military strike on Doha this Tuesday. Mr. President, Guyana condemns this violent act by Israel, which is a flagrant violation of international law and a direct and unprovoked assault on the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the state of Qatar. We noted the destruction caused by the attack and that a Qatari national was killed. We express our full solidarity with the Amir and people of the state of Qatar. Mr. President, international law is under threat, and the Middle East region has unfortunately been the theater of too many frequent and serious violations of international law. Syria, Iran, Yemen, Lebanon, and now Qatar have all suffered violations of their sovereignty and territorial integrity by Israel, following unilateral decisions by the latter to militarily strike these countries. Just yesterday, we received reports of Israel's attack on Yemen involving strikes on civilian and residential facilities and the killing of several persons. Guyana reiterates its strong condemnation of these violations of international law and calls for full accountability for these crimes. The culture of impunity must not be allowed to take root, and this is precisely what is happening in the face of the Council's inability to respond decisively to these breaches of the peace and acts of aggression. Israel's protracted war in Gaza and its unlawful occupation of Palestinian territory remain at the center of the instability in the Middle East. Ending the war in Gaza and resolving the question of Palestine are therefore urgent priorities that the Council must advance pursuant to its responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. We further stress that the efforts of mediators to end the war in Gaza and to secure the release of the remaining hostages are seriously undermined and complicated by actions such as those taken by Israel on Tuesday. The success of the mediation efforts depend on the good faith engagement of all parties. The bombing of representatives of one party in the territory of one of the mediators risks setting back peace efforts. Israel's actions also belie its stated commitment to bring the hostages home. The state of Qatar has been a consistent ally in fighting terrorism and has been instrumental in the mediation efforts alongside the United States and Egypt to bring about a diplomatic solution to the war in Gaza and to secure the release of hostages still held there. Israel's recent actions do not in any way help these efforts. In the context of the foregoing, Guyana makes the following 4 appeals. First, the state of Qatar must be redressed for the unlawful act committed against it by Israel. The international order is premised on the rule of law, and states cannot simply contravene international law and the UN Charter in pursuit of unilateral objectives. Repeated violations of international law, if consistently met with no firm response from international organs such as the United Nations Security Council, risk engendering chaos and instability. Second, Israel's brutal war on Gaza must end immediately, unconditionally, and permanently. The catastrophic and man-made suffering to which civilians are subjected, and which has now escalated to famine, is a daily and painful reminder of how much this war continues to cost Palestinian civilians. Guyana urges the Security Council to take appropriate and urgent action in keeping with its responsibility to protect Palestinian civilians. Third, Guyana appeals to Israel to cease its warmongering in the already volatile Middle East. Too many fires have been ignited in the region, presenting serious risks to international peace and security. Israel must abide scrupulously with its obligations under international law. Fourth and final, Mr. President, we need strong political will to resolve the question of Palestine in a just, peaceful, and comprehensive manner. 8 decades is too protracted a period to have an entire nation living in a state of flux, marked by recurrent cycles of violence and oppression. This goes against all the values of the United Nations. Until we settle the Palestinian question, our work will not be truly comprehensive in reach. We urge all Council members and the wider membership of the United Nations to resolve that the 80th year of our organization would be the year in which we take strong and positive actions for the Palestinian people in their just struggle for peace and self-determination. Guyana resolves to doing its part to this end. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Guyana for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. President. First and foremost, I wish to thank the Undersecretary General for political and peace-building affairs.
Direct the parties to conflict in global humanitarian efforts to halt the famine. Colleagues, we all know the best solution to restore stability in the region: an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The release of
2020. This is the approach we pursue. This is the approach that the Prime Minister of Israel is trying to enable suffering. It also shows that extremists that rule Israel today do not care about the hostages. This is not a priority. Otherwise, how would we justify the timing of this attack? Because the negotiations were looking at the latest U.S. proposal. The negotiating team of Hamas have been getting together to discuss the U.S. proposal, and the attack occurred. Mr. President, I stand before you today and I urge your august council to bear its historic responsibility. Silence before the law of the jungle and targeting a sovereign country this way undermines international efforts, undermines the prospects of any peace process in our region. The continuation of such attacks does not only target Qatar, it is a clear threat to target any country that is working on achieving peace, and that undermines the trust in the United Nations. The state of Qatar stresses, under the leadership of its emir, may God protect him, that we will continue our humanitarian and diplomatic role without any hesitation in order to stop the bloodshed. At the same time, we will not condone any attack on our sovereignty. We will reserve the right to respond through tools guaranteed by international law. We call for peace, not war. Peace is our approach, and we will not be deterred by those who call for war and destruction. Before your Security Council, we present these facts, and we recall that today we're discussing an attack on all diplomatic efforts to reach peaceful solution. The only way to peace goes through negotiations, and it starts with a ceasefire and the release of all detainees and hostages, and ensuring the unconditional entry of humanitarian aid, and lifting the blockades. Allow me, on behalf of all peace-loving peoples around the world, I would like to be optimistic. We cannot succumb to extremists. We have to continue to pursue peace through the two-state solution, through the establishment of the independent Palestinian state, fully sovereign on Palestinian national soil according to international resolutions. We need two states, two peoples living side by side in peace. This will only be achieved through the adherence of the principles of international law. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Sheikh Al-Thani for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Mr. President, on September 9th, Israel carried out a precise and targeted strike in Doha. The strike targeted Hamas leaders who for years have planned and directed attacks against Israel, many times making these directives from the luxury confines in Doha. These terrorists were the sole target of the operation. The men targeted were not legitimate politicians, diplomats, or representatives. They were the masterminds of terror. They orchestrated the massacre on October 7th, murdering civilians, kidnapping children, raping women, wiping out entire communities. As the smoke still rose from the massacre, even as the attack was still unfolding, Hamas leaders in Qatar appeared live on television, proudly broadcasting their celebration. While Israelis hid in safe rooms, fled from gunfire, and endured murder, kidnapping, and rape, Hamas's leaders feasted and congratulated themselves in real time. These are the same men who called for jihad to escalate the conflict. They called for blood, not peace. They wild terror, not negotiation. And the terror has not stopped. Just days ago, at Ramot Junction in Jerusalem, Hamas terrorists opened fire on a bus stop crowded with children and adults. 6 innocent people were murdered, among them a 25-year-old who had immigrated from Spain, recently married and building his future in Israel, a rabbi who had dedicated his life to teaching the next generation, 2 residents of the community struck down in their own neighborhood. Among the wounded was a woman 8 months pregnant, left to fight for her life and the life of her unborn child. These are not numbers. They are lives, families, futures stolen. When the gunfire stopped, the bus and the pavement around it were drenched in blood. This is what terrorism looks like. Mothers clutching babies, a bus stop turned into a battlefield, a community scared in seconds. This is a reality we face in Israel. Terror raising its ugly head almost every single day. And let this council be reminded, there can be no immunity for terrorists. Hamas immediately praised the killers as heroic and exceptional, later claiming full responsibility for the attack and calling the massacre of innocent people a natural response. There is nothing natural about this. It is terror, pure and simple. Today, 48 innocent people are still held hostage by Hamas. Their families live in daily pain. It has been more than 700 days that innocent people have been trapped in Hamas captivity. 700 days of cruelty and abuse. Hamas has used them as bargaining chips, turning their suffering into currency. But let me be clear, there is no immunity for terrorists. Not for those who commit it, and not for those who enable it. Israel has agreed to President Trump's ceasefire proposal. We are ready to stop the fighting, but Hamas refuses. They keep the world waiting. They are in no rush. They have the time. Indifferent to the human suffering that their delay causes. And who suffers from this refusal? Not the leaders of Hamas, living abroad in the Ritz-Carlton in Doha. They don't suffer, they have the time. But the hostages languishing in their cells and the people of Gaza used as human shields. From the start, Hamas's strategy has been to embed its weapons among civilians. They hide rockets in schools, command centers in hospitals, and tunnels under homes. They put their own people in harm's way, then cry crocodile tears when civilians are hurt. Our fight is with Hamas, not with the people of Gaza, not with the state of Qatar. Israel will continue to take precautions to protect innocent lives. That is the difference between us and those who glorify massacre and terror. Like in the Bible, like Cain in the Bible, who was marked for the murder of his brother, so too are Hamas's leaders marked for their crimes. It doesn't matter where they hide, whether in the tunnel in Gaza or in a luxury hotel abroad. The mark of Cain is upon them. For too long, Hamas leaders have been sheltered not only in Doha, but in Beirut, Tehran, and elsewhere, parading as politicians and statesmen while acting as terrorists. They are treated like celebrities, when in reality, they are commanders of massacre and barbarism. This false disguise of legitimacy gave them freedom to move, to buy weapons, to recruit through so-called humanitarian networks, and to spread propaganda on international platforms that should have rejected them. This strike sends a message that should echo across this chamber. There is no sanctuary for terrorists, not in Gaza, not in Tehran, not in Doha. There is no immunity for terrorists. And yet, here in this Council, some members chose to give Hamas legitimacy, even protection. Israel will not. We will act against the leaders of terror wherever they are hiding. Mr. President, we have heard today in this Council allegations about a breach of the territorial sovereignty of Qatar. But one must ask, where were these concerns when sovereignty was violated by terror itself? On October 8, when Hezbollah launched rockets across Israel's border, when Houthis fired a ballistic missile at Ben Gurion airport, or just days ago, when a Houthi drone crashed into the arrivals hall of Rabon airport, injuring civilians. How can anyone hide behind allegations appealing to the principles of international law while giving legitimacy to those who openly glorify October 7th and continue to plot terror? Mr. President, this brings me to Qatar. Prime Minister Al-Thani, the time for Qatar to choose has come. For too long, Qatar has harbored terrorists, offering Hamas leaders sanctuary in luxury hotels while they orchestrate massacres and terror attacks. History will not be kind to accomplices. Either Qatar condemns Hamas, expels Hamas, and brings Hamas to justice, or Israel will. Mr. President, the world has faced moments like this before. Today, the world remembers the devastating terrorist attacks of September 11th. That tragic day, like October 7th for Israel, was a day of fire and blood. In the aftermath of 9/11, the countries that uphold freedom, equality, and democracy in this Council stood shoulder to shoulder. 2 weeks later, this Council adopted Resolution 1373. It said plainly, no state may harbor terrorists. No state may fund them. No state may give them safe haven. I urge you all to read this resolution. Any government that does so breaks this Council binding obligations. That principle was clear then. It must be upheld today. And when bin Laden was eliminated in Pakistan, the question asked was not Why target a terrorist on foreign soil? No one asked that question. The question was, why was a terrorist given shelter at all? The same question must be asked today. There was no immunity for bin Laden, and there can be no immunity for Hamas. And in facing terror, history shows that members of this council have done the very same. From 2014 to 2022, France struck terrorists in Mali, Chad, Burkina Faso, and Mauritania. In 2014 and 2015, the United Kingdom carried out airstrikes in Iraq and Syria against ISIS. So I ask, if these actions were justified then, why is Israel singled out now? Why are claims concerning sovereignty invoked only against Israel and ignored when others act to defend themselves? Is Israeli blood worth less? The question to ask is not why Israel targets the mastermind of terror, but why they are sheltered abroad, while hostages starve in captivity and Gazans are left to suffer. Israel's fight is not only Israel's. It is a fight of all who believe in democracy against those who worship death and violence, light against darkness, civilization against barbarism, justice against terror. We will continue until the hostages are free, until our people are safe, and until terror can no longer find sanctuary in any corner of the world, because there is no, and there never will be, immunity for terrorists. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Israel for the statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Ayman Safadi, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs in the Inspectorate of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan.
Qatar is our choice, and it's a clear choice. Our choice and our vision is a secure and stable Middle East, where just, durable, and comprehensive peace prevails. A Middle East that realizes the right of the Palestinian people to life, freedom, and statehood. A Middle East that secures that guarantees the security of the Israelis and the Palestinians and all peoples of the region. A Middle East where cooperation replaces conflict and hope replaces despair. The Israeli government and its extremists.
For the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Kuwait.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of God the Merciful, Mr. President, I have the honour of issuing this statement on behalf of the members of the Gulf Cooperation Council, namely UAE, the Kingdom of Bahrain, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the Sultanate of Oman, the State of Qatar, and my country, the State of Kuwait. We congratulate you on acceding to the presidency of the Council this month. And we wish to convey to you our gratitude to Panama for the presidency of the Council last month. We also thank Ms. DiCarlo for her briefing. Mr. President, today we are making this joint statement in order to reaffirm our unwavering solidarity of the Gulf with the brotherly nation of Qatar. We categorically reject any and all violations of its sovereignty, security, and its stability. We recall our collective position, which has remained unchanged, namely that the full responsibility for these heinous acts and their consequences falls on Israel's shoulders squarely. We will not tolerate any attack on the security of our countries or on the stability of our region. Mr. President, we condemn in the strongest possible terms Israel's criminal, cowardly and flagrant attack on Tuesday the 9th of September of this year. That act of aggression constitutes a dangerous and direct escalation against a sovereign Arab state. It was an attack which targeted residential complexes that housed a number of members of the Hamas political bureau in Doha, Qatar. The attack claimed the lives of several people, including a Qatari citizen. Other people were wounded, and the attack occurred in a residential neighborhood which included a school and housing. We convey our condolences to our brothers in Qatar. This aggression is a flagrant violation of international laws and customs. It stands as a grave threat to the peace and security of the Qatari people and the residents of the state of Qatar. We here warn unambiguously regarding the consequences of continuing to violate state sovereignty. National security of states or the countries of the GCC is a red line for us, and similar acts will be met with collective actions, tougher in nature, and legal political measures as deterrents, according to what's agreed upon within international organizations. Mr. President, this aggression occurred as part of systematic policies and continued attempts on Israel's part to undermine regional security and stability. We cannot stand for this irresponsible Israeli behavior, this reckless Israeli behavior which imperils the region's security. We must not tolerate any action which targets our sovereignty and security. This hostile approach will be met with a united stance of the Gulf countries. There will be no compromises made on sovereignty or security. Mr. President, we reiterate that the state of Qatar has the right and duty to deal with any aggressions or violations which undermine or threaten stability in the region. It can do so in the strongest terms. Qatar has the right to respond to the heinous attack and to take all measures necessary to respond to it in order to protect its people, defend its sovereignty and its territorial integrity. This includes taking diplomatic, political and/or legal measures. We reiterate that this right is enshrined in the United Nations Charter. We recall that dealing resolutely and firmly with this aggression will act as a deterrent to those tempted to undermine the security of a state. This aggression was not only against Qatar but against the region as a whole. The attack constitutes a flagrant threat to international peace and security. We consequently urge the international community as a whole to shoulder its legal and moral responsibilities in terms of these rogue attacks, and we urge the international community to hold the perpetrators accountable. In this connection, we insist that there is a need to adopt decisive, resolute measures as blocks and as regions. This applies also and particularly to the Security Council. The Council must adopt practical and immediate measures, including clear measures to deter any further acts of aggression, and the Council must lever all accountability tools to ensure that this flagrant aggression against the sovereignty of a state that plays a central role in de-escalation efforts does not occur again. Mr. President, we commend the sincere efforts of the state of Qatar under the leadership of Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, Emir of Qatar. We commend their efforts to mediate, de-escalate and to resolve disputes through peaceful means in the region. They've also done this with a view to protecting international peace and security in accordance with the UN Charter. attacking a loyal mediator torpedoes the chances of remain resolved to continue all national peace and security. We stand shoulder to shoulder with the state of Qatar, a brotherly state, and we call for this aggression to be referred to specialized international mechanisms. The international community must hold the attackers accountable immediately. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Kuwait for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Egypt.
Mr. President, Your Excellency, Mr. Abdulrahman Al Thani, the Prime Minister of Qatar, Your Excellency, Mr. Ayman Al Safadi, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Jordan, Mr. Anwar Gargash, Diplomatic Advisor to the President of the UAE. We gather today to discuss the aggression that was unacceptable against the state of Qatar, that was making tireless efforts alongside with Egypt and the U.S. to achieve ceasefire in Gaza Strip and achieve security and peace for the Palestinian and Israeli peoples alike. Israel's cooperation and appreciation of these efforts was a treacherous aggression on Qatari territory under unacceptable pretexts. Mr. President, Israel committed an aggression against an Arab country that was not the first of its kind and will not be the last since the beginning of the crisis in Gaza. It committed this aggression in light of a genocide committed against the Palestinian people that we must not overlook, and in light of the displacement of the Palestinian people and the occupation of their lands that must end. Unfortunately, Israel will continue this aggression and these crimes as long as the Security Council and the international community do not take serious measures to deter Israel from its policy of extreme aggression and its repeated violation of international law and the Charter of the UN. Mr. President, Egypt would like to highlight the following points. First, Egypt condemns in the strongest terms the blatant aggression against the state of Qatar, which targeted the political bureau of Hamas movement in a flagrant violation of the provisions of international law and the UN Charter. Egypt stresses its full solidarity and its position in support of the brotherly state of Qatar that made strenuous efforts that should be appreciated and praised by all to stop the war in Gaza and to achieve stabilization in the region. Egypt stresses that the international law and the UN Charter guarantee to Qatar and Arab countries that have been subjected to similar Israeli aggressions, it guarantees them all the options to address this aggression, which the Security Council should not stand by in its face. The Israeli aggression clearly reveals the party that is hindering the achievement of a ceasefire agreement, and the party that wishes to prolong the war for extremist political and religious goals aimed at displacing the Palestinian people and attempting to liquidate their cause, as well as for internal reasons that we all know. The aggression targeted Qatar, which is making tremendous efforts with Egypt to reach this agreement, and aimed at a meeting that was scheduled to discuss the latest offer to stop the war and proposals to do that, which of course will further cause difficulties and make it difficult to reach a solution within the negotiations. Third, this brutal attack clearly reflects the ideology of Israeli politics, which knows nothing but the language of killing, destruction and aggression, an ideology that does not distinguish between right and wrong and is even assaulting those who are helping it. And we wonder, how do mediation efforts succeed? How can they succeed in convincing all parties in the region of the feasibility of a peaceful solution while Israel is attacking the mediators who facilitate this solution, who are the mediators for it? Egypt stresses that the military option and the method of imposing solutions by force have not worked for Israel, as all fronts of the conflict are still burning and tensions prevail due to repeated Israeli aggressions. The wall of hatred is taking root again. In fact, the only breakthrough in this landscape was achieved only at the beginning of the year due to mediation efforts that succeeded in achieving a ceasefire that we had hoped will be sustained had it not been for Israel's desire to prolong the aggression. Fifth, Egypt calls